dominant narrative is that land grabbing occurs largely in Africa. Estimates put it 70% of land grabs occur in Africa, but that's highly questionable. For one, the methodology about quantifying land grabs is very problematical. How then can one quantify something that there's no consensus to begin with of what it means land grab, much more to pin it down in one region? Putting Africa as cornering the vast majority of land grabs in the world today actually de-emphasizes what's going on in other regions like Latin America or the former Soviet Union or Southeast Asia. The dominant discourse about Africa-centric discourse is linked closely to the obsession on the so-called new bad guys doing land grabbing, Chinese, South Koreans, Gulf states, who are, most of them are into Africa. And their presence, the Chinese presence or the Gulf states' presence in Latin America is marginal. So that means that doesn't mean that there's not much land grabbing going on in Latin America. There is, but the key actors there are Latin American companies. So that is one thing that is de-emphasized in the narrative: the alliance of regional, intra-regional capital and domestic capital. The dominant discourse in land grabbing is very much foreign-centric. Like, it's only land grabbing when it involves actors who are foreigners. But how about exactly the same things that are being done, extractive, destructive, but are done by domestic capital or in alliance with some foreign capital? You don't call that land grabbing? The same thing, but done by a domestic capital. So the thing that I was trying to emphasize is to go into the logic and character of these land deals and when and how we can call them land grabs, be they carried out by foreigners or domestic capital. And the Latin American case demonstrates this quite well, where a lot of land grabbings are done by domestic capital and often in alliance with regional capital. The point is that the same negative impact on people and the environment through these land deals can be carried out regardless of the nationality of investors. What characterizes land grabbing is that it is accompanied by the rise of what I call flex crops that have multiple and flexible uses. These are crops that were invented in response to the convergence of multiple crises of food, energy, and climate change. So that you have soya, which can be used for food, feed, or fuel. You have oil palm, which can be used for industrial uses or food, feed, and fuel, and so on, sugarcane and others. And you can even throw in flexible trees or flexible forests, where it can be for climate change, for other purposes, for ethanol, and for demands for industrial uses. It's this kind of thing where investments feel much safer. If the price of ethanol is higher, sell ethanol. If the price of sugarcane is higher, sell sugarcane. So that a lot of investments are going into this flex crops. And if you see in Latin America, land grabbing and is accompanied by flex crops. The point that is complicated here, because the political implications for that is that civil society organizations campaigning against biofuels, for example, they have difficulty doing those things, because when they say, oh well, oil palm for biodiesel is bad, well, the Colombian government can just say, well, But the palm oil in Colombia is not used for biodiesel, it's used for cooking oil for China. And that's what is happening here. It's like a balloon. You press it here, it pops out there. In the early discourse, the role of the central states is not very prominent. But in recent years, during the past couple of years, I think the role of the state, national governments are starting to come out, but not yet in a very systematic way. And I think the truth is that in almost all land grabbing sites, the role of the state is central. Not just important, but it's so central. Many of the lands being grabbed in different regions of the world, including Latin America, are frontier lands where these lands are in the what I call the gray area of property relations. They are not fully privatized, so that the state and the state alone would claim absolute authority to claim these lands and dispose these according to what they think is most efficient in terms of investment. There's this obsession about the scale of land, so that leads into this competition about who can offer the biggest estimate of the quantity of lands being grabbed, which is important, but it tends to miss the dynamics of capital underpinning such a large-scale land acquisition. The point that I was trying to make is that it's more useful to always look at the character and scale of land acquisition and character and scale of capital. Only then are we going to make sense of what's going on in here. The academic community is not an undifferentiated community. They cannot be divorced from the political context and political settings within which they are embedded. Having said that, that gives us a lot of things to reflect about so-called objectivity. I presented three ideal types of positions on land grabbing: regulate to facilitate land grabbing, regulate to mitigate negative impacts and maximize opportunities, and regulate to block and roll back land grabbing. Different academics are positioned in all those three, whether consciously or otherwise. So-called meaning of objectivity can only be interpreted in that particular context. Your objective within the context of which current in here. And I think the only thing that in the end you can fall back on the academics is at least two things: the rigor of their scientific argument, the rigor of their methodology, and the quality of evidence that they present. But in terms of value judgment, it's always there. You always tend to belong to a particular position.